So now we'll do part 2. We're on Nun Aleph Amud Beis. We just finished the Mishnah, but the last thing we learned was the Brisa said you're not allowed to crush snow or ice in order to melt it. And Rashi said the Isser was, it's daima, similar to Malacha Moilid. You're taking a solid and turning it into a liquid. The Gemara says you're allowed to put ice cubes into a liquid, even though the ice is going to melt in the liquid, in the water. And there are two reasons given. The Ramban says because the melting is happening indirectly. You're only causing it to melt. You're not doing it. And the Rashba says because since the melting is happening in a liquid, so it's not as noticeable that the solid is changing into a liquid because it's happening within the liquid. The Rambam, quoting a Tosefta, says that when you have it in a liquid, you're even allowed to do it manually. When you put the ice into the liquid, you're allowed to stir it in order to make it melt. Evidently, he holds of the second reason, that it's not so visible that the solid is becoming a liquid because it's happening within a liquid. Shulchan Aruch says that you can take congealed gravy, put it next to a heat source, even though the heat source is going to liquefy the congealed gravy. So evidently, Shulchan Aruch rules like the first reason, that the Isser is only if you're doing it. And here, since it's happening by itself, you're just causing it to happen, it's okay. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, based on that, you can, let's say, take ice and put it in the sun in order to melt it, because as long as you're not doing it, even though you're causing it, and causing it is not a problem, even though you're not doing it in a liquid. The Rashba has a different reason about the Isser of crushing snow or ice, and he says it's schita, similar to schita, like squeezing a liquid out of a solid. There's an issue, are you allowed to make ice cubes on Shabbos? So the Shevet Halevi says that if the Isser of liquefying ice is schita, is squeezing, then that has nothing to do with taking water and making ice, then it should be mutter. But if the reason is because you're creating something new, the same way it would be usher to take a solid and create a liquid, it would be usher to take a liquid and create a solid. However, that's as long as, it depends which of the two pshatim you hold. According to the first pshat, the isser of liquefying a solid was only when you did it manually, not when you caused it. So here, when you take water and you put it into the freezer to make ice cubes, you're not doing it manually, you're only causing it. So the chayr should be mutter. So again, if the isser of making water out of ice is schita, has nothing to do with making water into ice. Even if it's moilid, but if the reason why you're allowed to put ice into water is because you're only causing it to melt, here also would be mutter because you're only causing it to freeze. However, if the isser is because it's very visible that you're making that change, only if you have the ice and water, it's not so visible, then here it would be usher. So the katchila, so the Ramah says the katchila, you shouldn't defrost gravy or ice cubes in the sun. So the Ramah says the katchila, you shouldn't cause a change. So the chayr then, you shouldn't cause the change of water to ice either. But many poskim are mekel. I see here in his notes, he says that b'shem Reb Moshe, he was mekel, and Reb Shlomo Zalman, and the Debretziner Rav, that the making of ice was mutter. I think if there's a great need, it's very hot and you need some ice, I think people are mekel, but everybody should check with his own Rav. So the Mishnah, now there's a mitzvah of shvisas behemtecha. Your animal also has to rest. So you're not allowed to have your animal go out while it's carrying something which is considered carrying. But anything what it wears normally is not considered carrying. So what can an animal wear out l'rshus harabim? So what can't it wear out l'rshus harabim? A camel can have this rope or strap in its mouth, which is normal. A na'aka, we'll see in the Gemara what it is. It's a female camel. Bachatam can go out with a nose ring. Luvdekim, okay, it's a Libyan donkey. Beprumbia can go out with it's a metal thing that goes into its cheek that controls it. And a sus, a horse, can go out bashir with a collar around its neck. Because in the collar there used to be a ring, and in the ring they put a rope or a strap. That's how you controlled the horse. V'chol balei shir, all animals that normally wear a collar, yotzin b'shir, can go out wearing that share, wearing that collar, v'nim shochem b'shir, and you can pull them using that collar. The Mishnah says, mazan aleim. In general, when, let's say, this collar becomes tamei meis, you're allowed to spray on that collar v'chein toivlan, and you can even immerse that collar b'mkoima while it's on the neck of the animal. So if the animal goes into a river and the collar was tamei, it becomes tor. Or if it was tamei meis, you can spray on the collar. The Rishonim explain, what's the chiddush that you can spray on the collar while the animal is wearing it? They say an interesting halacha. There's a Mishnah in Parah that, let's say, if you're trying to spray on a utensil, by mistake you spray on an animal. So the halacha is any fluid that remains on the azoiv that you sprayed from becomes disqualified, becomes possible. Why? Because you weren't careful. If you were so careless to spray on the animal instead of on the object you were trying to be matayr, it means you're not paying close attention to the mechatos, so the mechatos becomes disqualified. So the chash would be, maybe I shouldn't spray on the collar of the animal while it's on the animal, because if you miss and you hit the animal, you've disqualified the water that's still on the azoiv. Kamash Malon, that people that are doing spraying of mechatas are very careful, therefore you'll aim it to get it on the afsor, on the share, on the collar, and you won't get it on the animal. We're not chayish. My naka b'chatam. What is the translation of naka b'chatam? Amar Rabba bar bar Chana naksa chivarti, a white camel, female, which is a wild, strong camel. Bizmama de parzala is allowed to go out with a iron ring in its nose, because being a tougher animal, it needed this iron ring in its nose to control it with. Luvdikim beprumbia. Luvdikim, this Libyan donkey, which is a powerful donkey, can go out beprumbia, which was a metal piece that went into its cheek and he controlled it with. Rav Huna says Chamor Luba, this Libyan donkey, bepagid de parzala, would go out with a bit of iron. Levi Shadar Zuzi Lebei Chayzoi Lemizben Le Chamor Luba. Levi sent money to Chayzoi, to this place. He wanted to buy a Libyan donkey. Saru Shadrule Sari. So they went and they wrapped up the money that Levi had sent, and they put some barley into the bag, and they sent back the money with barley. L'meimer, to tell him, Nigri de Chamor Sari. A donkey's feet gain strength by giving it more barley. So Levi wanted to buy a Libyan donkey. So they said, what do you have to buy a wild Libyan donkey for? You have a donkey. Elamai, your donkey doesn't work as well as a Libyan one. So if you give it more barley, it'll work just as well. So you might as well just upgrade what you have instead of going buying yourself a Libyan donkey. Again, we said a regular camel goes out with a rope or a strap in its mouth. This female camel already needs a nose ring, something major. What if you switch them? Can a regular camel with the nose ring, or this female camel, the wilder one, using this strap or rope in its mouth? So the Gemara explains, there's no issue, like if you're going to take this wild or strong female camel and just have a rope or strap in its mouth, for sure, there's no question. Because kivud le'minterabei, since it's not sufficient to control it with that rope or strap, is masuhu, it's useless, and it's merely carrying that rope or strap. Kiti boilav, the shaila is gomel b'chatamai, a regular camel, but with a nose ring. Kivin the sagile ba'afsor, since a rope or strap would have been sufficient, so masuhu, so an over protection, something which is beyond the norm, is already considered carrying a load. Or maybe extra protection is never called a load. It's a better protection, but it's good enough. I mean, it's not considered a masui. Amar lefana of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yaisi kach Amar Abba. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yaisi said, my father Rabbi Yaisi said, Arba behemas yotzes ba'afsar. There are 4 animals that can wear this rope or strap: hasus, va'peret, a horse, a mule, a gomel, va'chamar, a camel, and a donkey. Lemutei mai. What are you excluding? Lav, would you not say lemutei gomel, that the camel can only wear this rope or strap? But a camel, it cannot wear a khatam, a nose ring, because it's overkill, it's too much. And since it doesn't need that kind of protection, therefore it's considered a masli. When it says no, these four can use an afsor, can use a rope or strap. L'muteinoko be afsor. But a female camel or a white camel, which is powerful, that cannot go out with an afsor because it needs a khatam. It needs a nose ring. And if it goes out wearing a rope or strap, it's insufficient. And if it's insufficient, then it's considered a masli. V'machnisa tan in the brayso we learned luvdekim v'gomel yotzim ba'afsor. Now a camel goes out ba'afsor. We knew that. The regular camel, strap or a rope, is what you control it with. But a luvdekim, a Libyan donkey, also can have an afsor, even though our Mishnah said that it needs a pagi de parzala. So it seems that pagi de parzala is very good, but an afsor is good enough and fine. By the way, this issue of if the animal has something which is overprotective, is that considered a masli or not? Ketanoi seems to be machlokes tanoim. There's a brayso, ein chaya yoytze besogar, v'chanan yoimer yoytze besogar b'chol davar mishtamer. A chaya should not go out wearing a rope around its neck, and Chananya says a chaya could go out with a rope around its neck or anything which is used in order to control the chaya. B'mayaskina. If you're talking about a bear, so misagile sagar. So there's no point of, if you have a pet bear, there's no point in it going out wearing a rope because the rope is not something you can control a bear with. If it's a small little chaya, milay sagile sugar. Certainly a cigar is good enough. So for sure, it's allowed to go out with a cigar. Elalav chatuli kavana. Different is a cat. See, Tanakama sover, Tanakama holds, given the sagila b'misla ba'alma, since a cat you can even have used a string, so therefore to have a cigar, to have a collar, is masliyu. To have this rope is a masli, because it's overkill, it's too much, and since it's too much, considered a masli. And Chananya sover called it tirusa yaser, so l'armina masliyu. Even though the cat could have been controlled with a string, but now instead you have a rope around its neck. It's extra control. Extra control is not called a masli. Amar Ravuna Bar Chi Amar Shmuel halacha Chananya. The halacha is like Chananya, that if the animal is wearing something which is over control, it's still not considered a masli. Levi Breder Ravuna Bar Chia Rabba Bar Ravuna Avakazli Borcha. Levi Breder Ravuna Bar Chia and Rabba Bar Ravuna were going on the road and they were on donkeys. Kadme Chamor the Levi le Chamor the Rabba Bar Ravuna. So Levi's donkey somehow got ahead of Rabba Bar Ravuna's. So Cholash died to the Rabba Bar Ravuna. Rabba Ravuna felt bad because he felt that Levi should have had more of their cheretz than starting a race, starting to drag race with their donkeys. A case of road rage. So Levi said to himself, really I wasn't trying to get ahead of Rabba Bar Ravuna, but my donkey kind of has a mind of its own. So Emile Mil says, I'm going to say something to Rabba Bar Ravuna, ki heichi di toisav date, so that he should calm down and he should realize that I wasn't trying to race and I wasn't trying to get ahead of him, I wasn't being disrespectful. My donkey kind of did it on its own. Omar Lei, so Levi says, Chamor shasokov roim. If you have like a real wild donkey, kagainzeh, like mine, that runs off even when I don't want him to, ma'ulotzes beprumbia b'Shabbos. Would that prumbia be considered extra protection? And since it's extra protection, maybe it's too much and it's a masli, or maybe since I got a wild one, it needs a prumbia. Amarlei, so he said, relax. Your father said in the name of Shmuel, Chananya. So that makes no difference, even if your donkey would not have been a wild one. But to have a prumbi on it instead of just an afsar is also okay, because extra protection is never considered a masui. But at least he now realized that Levi got ahead not because he was trying to race or trying to be disrespectful, but the donkey had a mind of its own. So there's still another topic which we discussed in the past. There was a Rashi of putting a meichem al gavi meichem. Rashi felt it was mutter. But putting cold water on top of a meichem, Rashi held it was usher. And Rashi said it had to do with Hatmana, and I still have a kasha. It's still not worked out properly. Why Mechem al Gabi Mechem should be mutter if the bottom one is Mekayim Hevel, is keeping the top one warm. If you hold that it's Atmana, if you hold that Atmana doesn't have to be completely insulated, but even partially touching is called Atmana, why can you put a hot kettle on top of a hot kettle? So that still needs to be worked on. Anyway, I hope that everybody's healthy and stays healthy. And whoever needs a refuah shalema, Kadosh Baruch Hu should send a refuah shalema. We should see each other in person very soon.